Hey there, BookTube. Noah. Everyone who reads it must converse is the channel. Thanks for coming by again. This is another installment of the Everyone who reads it must converse Codex Cantina team up Tolstoy triggered. We're going to go through a very cool little short story today by Leo Tolstoy. This is actually an adaptation from a story by Maupassant. Maupassant is a French writer, for anybody who's not familiar, and it is he's just like a master of short stories. This short story is a little problematic, I guess I would say, because I can't find an English translation of it. Matthew over at Mayberry Book Club, or maybe Amy at from the Dusty Bookshelf. Maybe one of you guys can illuminate for me whether it's even been translated into English. I know there's collections of the complete Maupassant stories. Is it just saying that complete short stories or something like that. I've seen this translated as sentenced to death, quote, sentenced to death, things like that. But how the title of the Tolstoy short story is Too Dear with an exclamation point. And we'll get to the title in a little bit. But we're doing the Tolstoy short story examination and analysis a little bit different this time. The prompts are more just to foster discussion and so if anybody wants to get in and read this short story is really only like 3 or 4 pages. It is so short, and it's wonderful. It's hilarious, actually. It's a great short story. I can definitely see that it's an adaptation of a Maupassant story, and Tolstoy does his thing with it. It's very good. So please read it if you feel inspired. Do the prompts and get in with us. Maybe you'll illuminate something that the guys over at Codex Cantina, Uno and Crypto, and myself, we don't bring out. So very cool. What this is about essentially is a very small kingdom that is, a kingdom that is maybe the size of like a state, or a small state here in the United States. Something like, Delaware or Rhode Island, or something really small area-wise, and with a very modest population. Not very big at all, but it is its own kingdom, and it has a king, and it is a monarchy, and it is situated between France and Italy, and called Monaco. And this kinglet, as he is described, this kinglet, kind of does his thing, just like any other king, but just on a very much smaller scale than what you would think of as a king and a kingdom. So there's a murder in the dominion of this king, and they try the murderer very officially, and they sentence him to death. Well, the price, since this kingdom, is very modest and doesn't have the means to, publicly execute someone, doesn't have the infrastructure in place for that, reaches out to the surrounding, to France, to Italy, and asks for help, decides that the cost is too high, and instead of putting the guy to death, sends him to life imprisonment. After a few months, up to a year of the imprisonment, sees the bill for the imprisonment and confining of this individual, and decides that that's too much money, and so just kind of lets him, hopes that he just escapes and leaves. And he doesn't. He stays. He sticks around, and he says, you guys, I don't have to work anymore. You guys have destroyed my name anyways. whether or not, did he do the crime? Did he murder somebody? As far as the short story is concerned, yeah. I mean, he's a murderer too. But he says, I can't go anywhere. My name is destroyed. I can't go work. I can't do anything in my life. So, I'm content to stay here. And they're like, okay. After another month, after committee and subcommittee is convened to decide what to do, they decide to pay this guy a monthly annuity for the rest of his life to leave. And it's just ironic and silly, but what is it illustrating? So feel free to read it. I'm not going to say much more about that, and I'm just going to go into the prompts now. So the first thing, the number one that we came up with: examine a true king as opposed to a kinglet. And what I kind of, where I got with this is to say, a true king, a king proper, is all about nobility. This kinglet is not worried about nobility. What he's worried about is keeping up appearance, and he's worried about maintaining the appearance that he is an actual king, and that's just all that there is to it. His taxes, his income is so modest from his domain that he can't do much else except for just to keep it going the way that it is, and then to have his palaces and have his life as the king. It's a good life, but it's not, what a real king is noble, is, at least in outward appearance, putting up that air of nobility, and even divine decree that he is a king, and demanding respect, and demanding that prestige even above a lord or a landowner or something like that. This king is this kinglet is more about maintaining and just keeping up appearance. Number two, examine the governing body's responsibility to law and punishment in Too Dear. Well, it is touched on for sure that this king and everybody involved understands that they have a responsibility to maintain law and order in their domain. What does that turn into? It turns into bureaucracy. And I can't help but think, when I'm reading through this small story, that when they're talking about a committee convened to explore the options for what to do, and then a subcommittee for this, that, or the other, and that kind of thing, that, well, what's the cost of all that? If you're worried about the cost of of carrying out your sentence, what is the cost of this committee and this subcommittee when you're just exploring different ways to save money by what you're gonna do to this murderer who actually did what is said that he did. So the responsibility to law and punishment is to actually withhold and uphold that that structure, that governing structure, and it turns into a game of keeping up appearances in a way. Examine the cost of a life in Too Dear. Number three, examine the cost of a life in Too Dear. So this guy is sentenced to death first off. Well, how much would it cost to put him to death? 16,000 francs from the French giving them a guillotine and an executioner coming in and doing this. 16,000 francs. He says that's way too much. Over 2 francs per person in my domain. It's too much. Ask Italy. Maybe they'll do it for a cheaper price. 12,000 francs for executing the man. Okay, that's still too much. Maybe we move the sentence from execution to a life imprisonment. It will show your mercy and also save us money. Okay. 600 francs a year, over 600 francs a year to house this guy and feed him. That's still too much. It's too much. It's too much of a strain on this kinglet's finances to do this. And so the end result is a 600 franc pension, not over 600, but a 600 franc pension per year, annuity, and he will leave and not come back to the to live in the king's domain in Monaco. He can still travel into Monaco. He goes in and collects his money, and he will go to the gambling house and gamble and live comfortably the rest of his life. And there's your ironic twist. So as you can see, this kind of thing on the surface of it is this kind of worrying about money, worrying about and talking about the bureaucracy of this kinglet's governmental structure. And it brings up moral themes. So I just took it to in the way of the murderer's end, that he ends up on an annuity, living very comfortably and doing pretty much whatever he wants, being paid by the government from here on out. Doesn't need to work. So how does that set, and what would be more proper, is how I kind of thought to approach it, because it kind of ties up the rest of what I've said there. So it sets not well, of course. On the surface of it, it's funny, just like ironically, and just like, oh man, people are crazy. This probably does happen. This probably has happened since the beginning of time, of government and the kind of thing that we're talking about. It's probably happened multiple millions of times in the history of human beings, and something like it. And it's ridiculous, and truth is stranger than fiction, and it's funny on the surface of it, but actually we're talking about a murderer who then actually gets paid, is probably more well off than the victim's family and things like that. And then what would have been more proper? Like, what is the right course of action? Well, what happens is that this king is not at all worried about, well, what exactly, what must be done? What is the right thing? What is this noble, right, true course of action? And well, that would be to exert justice. And if they're on that kind of thing where capital punishment is commonplace, and they're going to put this guy to death, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, then they should do it by any means necessary, whether it take 12,000 francs or whatever. But that kind of uprightness and doing the right thing like that is not what is the main concern of this kinglet. It is saving money and trying to trying to skirt by as in any way he can to keep up his appearance. So what should have been done is just to bite the bullet and to say, okay, yeah, well, we'll just do it. I'll sell a painting or two, or I'll lay off a couple of my servants. They'll go and be farmers for a year, and then I'll hire them back, or something like that. Just whatever it might take to do what is right. And it just shows kind of human failings, how people can be, no matter in what position you are in life, kind of short-sighted, and by not addressing a problem in the right way, you end up paying for it, tenfold more than what it is that would have been the hardship that you went through to do the right thing. So I enjoyed it. I have enjoyed the Maupassant story read throughs that I've heard from Matthew over there, and I think I'm gonna get me some. I love short stories. They're quick and easy reads. You just get them. This Tolstoy triggered series has been really fun. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Una and Crypto, for getting on board with this and us doing a good job with it, I think. And catch y'all later, BookTube. Thank you very much. Bye bye.